Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Worldviews. Today, we are joined by philosopher Peter van Inwagen. He's known for his work on free will, metaphysics, and the philosophy of religion. He's a former atheist who became a Christian, and he's written influential books such as An Essay on Free Will and The Problem of Evil. Peter's currently a philosophy professor at Notre Dame. Dr. van Inwagen, thank you for coming on.
Okay. I wouldn't say I was ever an atheist, just an agnostic, pretty heavily weighted.
Oh man, my research deceived me. Then we'll go with that. Then, so what initially drew you to study philosophy?
Well, I was a math major at a place where a math major pretty much met, multivariable calculus and partial differential equations and stuff like that. And that stuff is really, really hard. It's like being a pianist. You have to practice technique. Um, and it's really boring until you get into it. If you're deeply into it, that's interesting, but you have to go through this long period when it was boring. And I didn't have any willpower to practice boring technique. And I started to flunk courses and everything. And they said, you'd better switch to something else. And I'd liked some stuff I'd taken in high school in philosophy in Pennsylvania. And I was also thought um, philosophy at least has to do with arguments. That's kind of like what drew me to mathematics, proofs, arguments. So I said, I'll give philosophy a try. So that's what I did.
What part of Pennsylvania was that?
It was in the main line in Berwyn, Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's not near Pittsburgh though.
No, that's the other end of the state.
Gotcha.
The main line is a commuter line outside Philadelphia.
Okay, okay. And you just mentioned you were not an atheist but agnostic. So what was your influence up until your conversion and then afterwards? I guess your
Well,
philosopher influence.
I was raised as a Unitarian. We went to a Unitarian church, but you don't have to believe any particular thing to be a Unitarian. So, and I guess we didn't believe any particular thing. So I just stopped going to church afterwards. But that wasn't even difficult, the way it is for Roman Catholics or evangelicals or people like that. This big change of belief and everything in life. No, it's just a change of your weekly schedule. Is all it was for me.
Who were your big, I guess during that time, who were your big philosopher influences?
Alvin Plantinga, Wittgenstein, Richard Taylor, Saul Kripke. I don't know if those are even names to most people.
Plenty guy, I know. Are the Is Alvin still a pretty big inspiration now?
Well, his book, The Nature of Necessity, is still one of my models for doing philosophy. Of course, that was published in 1974, I think. So it's not a recent, but I heard it as lectures before it was published as a book.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and okay, so you obviously are not a compatibilist. You are more into free will.
Well, compatibilists believe in free will.
This is true.
They just believe it's compatible with determinism.
What would you say is a flaw with that logic? Because I am a compatibilist and I want to hear your arguments against me.
Well, that would be the consequence argument, principally, and in various versions. So if you determinism means that the present state of things is a consequence of the past states of things and the laws of nature. Well, what went on in the past isn't up to us, and what went on in or the laws of nature aren't up to us. So the things that are the consequences of the past and the laws of nature aren't up to us. So nothing's up to us because everything is, for determinism, is a consequence of the past and the laws of nature.
But yeah, I'm trying to think in terms of for a compatibilist though, it's like the ratio of determinism to free will is still not really determined from, or I guess if you're a compatibilist, you can kind of say what you think it is, but there's never like a defining line of, oh, existence is 50% free will, 50% predeterminism. So I guess you can kind of play with that, can't you, as a compatibilist?
I guess I'm not following that. So a determinist thinks that everything, without exception, in the present is a consequence of the past and the laws of nature. So if you had a complete knowledge, as Laplace said way back in the early 19th century, a being that had a complete knowledge of the position and momentum of every particle of matter in the universe and knew the laws of mechanics would thus know the entire future in every detail. That's determinism. I say that's incompatible with free will. Free will being, in my case, defined as the um, acting with the ability to do otherwise than you do.
You think, I mean, these are things that I guess if determinism was proven to be true, how do you think that would change your understanding of moral responsibility?
And wouldn't,
It wouldn't at all.
no, I would decide then that there was something wrong with the consequence argument. But you did say if determinism was proved to be true.
If it was,
That's
yeah.
a pretty strong statement, but grant me
If it was.
yeah, that's like saying to a religious believer, well, suppose it was proved that there wasn't any God. Well, and I'd stop going to church.
Mm,
But um, but I wouldn't give up moral responsibility. No, I would give up the consequence argument.
okay. And you have this interesting thing about you reject the existence of material objects like chairs and tables.
Um, some material objects, yeah.
Can you explain that theory and how it sort of shapes how you perceive the world? How one would perceive the world?
Well, so suppose you have a great big empty room, a gym, say, with nothing in it, and you've got a lot of blocks spread all over the floor of the gym. You think those blocks make up anything? They're not touching each other. You think there's an object made out of those blocks before they even touch each other?
Yes.
Okay. Um, Not everybody would, would you think it was odd if somebody said that those blocks don't make up anything yet?
I would say that's odd, yes.
Um, really? A lot of people think you have to put things together and make them touch each other before they start to add up to something.
Versus them just occupying space.
Well, I mean, look, suppose you have just two blocks sitting on the floor. Is there any in the gym? Is there anything bigger than a block in the gym?
No. If it's just the blocks, then no.
So so there isn't anything that's twice the size of a block in the gym.
If this is a fully empty gym, and it's just the
An
blocks,
empty gym, you put 2 blocks
yes. There's
in a
nothing
gym,
there's
there's
nothing
nothing
bigger.
that's twice the size of a block.
Yes.
Alright, good. You don't believe that the 2 up blocks add up to something bigger. Then there's nothing that has both those blocks as a part.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when you've got a lot of blocks in the gym, what do you do with the blocks to make it happen that there's something that has all those blocks as its parts?
Well, I guess you'd have to put the blocks together.
In what way?
Um, I guess you would have to combine them with some kind of either machine or a person to do it.
Well, I mean, yeah, I was thinking the finished product, not so much of the process. Is any, I mean, suppose you put the blocks in a one long line. Would
Yeah.
that do it?
Yes, that would do it.
Okay, then you've got a long linear object, I guess. So what you're giving here is an answer to what I call a special composition question. How do you get it when you've got some things that aren't parts of anything? Um, how do you make it that there's something that has all those things as its parts? How do you put things together to make a bigger thing when they aren't already a bigger thing? Um, and the point of my book, Material Beings, is that there's no good answer to the special composition question that gives you such things as chairs and tables. For example, suppose you said, well, they just have to be in contact. But you wouldn't say, would you, that if you and somebody shake hands, then there comes to be at the moment you press the flesh, there comes to exist something that's shaped like a statue of two people shaking hands. Well, maybe they have to be glued together then. But well, wait a minute. Suppose you shake hands after you've smeared your hands with that stuff that where the manufacturer warns Bond's skin instantly. So you're glued to the other guy. Or I mean, suppose you're a nasty little boy that smears glue on two hamsters and sticks them together. That doesn't make anything come into existence, does it? Um, the argument of the book consists of going through various answers to the special composition question and finding them all unsatisfactory, except, well, eventually we get to one that I regard as satisfactory that nobody else seems to. Um, but they don't yield tables and chairs.
Hmm. When did you discover that this was a problem?
No, I was just thinking about what brings things into existence,
What was
what the beginnings of existence of things are like.
Yeah, because what was, like, the process going from that
Well, I
problem.
mean, you think about these things. Ted Sider, in one of his books, said in 1987, Van Inwagen asked a good question, and he says sometimes a good question is more important than a good answer. So he doesn't agree with my answer to the question, but he likes the question. And so, I thought of the question and I tried to come up with answers to it. Now, of course, lots of my answers will depend on lots of other things that I think, or the lots of things that I would regard as acceptable answers. Like, what do you think you are?
What do I think I am?
Yeah.
I would say I'm, I guess you can take that question a lot of places, but if I was I know I'm a human being. I know I exist. I think I know I exist in the world, but I know philosophers would go all over
Yeah,
the place with
but
that.
as but I mean, but what are you?
What am I?
You say you're a human being?
Yes.
You mean you're a member of the species Homo sapiens?
Yes.
So you mean you're a living animal, living organism, fine. So when you use the word "I," um, that hand there, that's part of the thing that you call "I." Um, see, already you're disagreeing with somebody, a philosopher who says, "We are our brains."
I mean, yeah, but I think we're more than that too, I'd imagine.
Well, you can't both be something and be more than that. You have to choose.
At the
Nothing
choose
is more than itself.
Okay.
So, I mean, are you the living animal, or are you some part of the living animal? Or are you, as Descartes thought, an immaterial substance? Descartes and Plato thought immaterial substance. Are you, as other people thought, not really there at all, just a sort of illusion um, of selfhood, as they say? There's a lot of things, possible answers to the question, what am I? You know, I say I'm a living animal, but and do I have parts? Sure. Um, for example, if there is such a thing as my left hand, then it's a part of me, I say. Um, but if there are such things as my liver cells, then they're parts of me. Um, oh, oh, if there are such things as electrons and quarks, they're parts of me. Some of them I mean. Um, so I'm a thing with parts. How do those parts manage to add up to me? Well, part of what goes on in material beings is to try to provide an answer to the special composition question that allows there to be such things as animals. Who cares if there are tables and chairs, really? As long as matter is spread out in space and in time in a useful way, so that when we sit down, we don't fall to the floor, right? Who cares whether there are tables and chairs? But we do care about whether there's such things as ourselves. So, and if there are such things, and if we are, as I suppose, living animals, then we will care about whether there are such things as living animals. Um, my book, Material Beings, is essentially an attempt to make the material world safe for living animals. To find an answer to the special composition question that makes living animals exist. And I don't much care about other things.
Wait, so what was the
So I
timeline?
have nothing against tables and chairs. It's just that I, I don't have having a theory that doesn't allow for them is not doesn't make the theory unattractive to me. The only thing that would make the theory unattractive to me is that if it didn't allow for such things as us. So not the non-existence of tables and chairs is a simple side effect of the theory.
Okay, wow. That because to lash out a question like that onto writing a book, How many years did that take?
About 7.
And this is you, I imagine, nonstop thinking about how to unwind this question
Well,
and
not
find
nonstop, no. I'm a husband, a father. Um, I taught courses on other subjects. I wrote papers on other topics.
how many kids you got?
How many what?
How many children do you have?
I have 1 biological child and 3 stepchildren.
3 stepchildren. And how'd you meet your wife?
In church.
In church.
Mhm.
How long you guys been married for?
35 no, 36 years. Well,
Uh,
if we were both married, um, stayed married to our, original spouses, it would be almost 60 years, but
do you discuss philosophical questions with her?
no.
Never.
With the one exception that she is very interested in what forgiveness is, and she doesn't think of that as a philosophical question, really, but it is.
Is that something you guys team up on and discuss in depth, forgiveness?
And we've discussed it. Yeah.
Any conclusions?
Not in the sense of a full definition. I mean, a lot of interesting um, aspects of forgiveness have come up in the discussion.
Where did the root of that question come from? Like, why does she have a focus on forgiveness?
So, if you're a Christian, you're supposed to forgive everything that happens to you. Well, it's a um, everybody realizes that forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it does mean you have to like the person. These are things that everybody says. Um, but it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, and naturally, it might get somebody um, interested in saying exactly what am I supposed to do? What is it that I'm supposed to do if I'm supposed to forgive somebody? I mean, suppose somebody has a drunk driver has run over my daughter, my 4-year-old daughter, and I'm supposed to forgive him. What does that even mean? I mean, what do you do? Do you just say, I forgive you? And that probably isn't sufficient for forgiving anybody for anything. So you can see how it might trouble somebody who's under orders, as it were, to forgive everybody for every ill that's done to you. What it actually means to forgive somebody.
It's interesting. So then I'm also interested because how did you come to, because we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I guess I want to kind of hone in more on why was it the Christian God that best explained reality for you?
Why is it the Christian God that best explains reality for me? I wouldn't say that I'm a Christian because the Christian God best explains reality for me.
Okay. Why would you say you're a Christian?
Well, it was like being a rusty nut on a bolt and being turned. It was something that happened to me when I was about 40. I mean, look, I did do my best to write it down. There's a thing called quam delecta that you can read if you want to read the whole story as best I could write it down. And it it would tell you better than anything I could do in short scope here about what the conversion experience was like. But this is not a matter of reasoning your way to something the way I might have reasoned my way to my belief in um, I don't know, the consequence argument or the special composition question or something like that. That's not how you, I mean, that's not how you really decide what um, the basis of your life is going to be.
So how would you define your process then?
Well, didn't I just answer that question? Didn't I say it would be too difficult to explain that in the brief course of this, but that I have written a very lengthy piece that was the best explanation I could give of it, but it goes on and on. And any part of that going on and on that I left out would make the story incomplete. And even so, the story is only complete as it can, insofar as it can be put into words. But at least it's better than nothing.
Yeah. Do you
Philosophy has almost nothing.
Unknown caller.
Philosophy has almost nothing to do with it, um, other than well, I mean, look, there are all kinds of philosophical arguments against Christianity. I think as a philosopher, I can see philosophy has done this for me. I can see they weren't any good. They didn't. They didn't. They were just not. Um, just no reason to accept the premises at all. Um,
so you never you would say there's no good arguments against Christianity.
well, there's good arguments. They're just wrong. I mean, philosophy is full of good arguments that are wrong. That is, they were arguments that were produced by people of the um, very, very great intellects, but still, I think just wrong. I mean, if that wasn't true, wouldn't there be more agreement in philosophy? Or else, also, for either all philosophy would be lousy, it wouldn't be worth paying attention to, or everybody would agree. Well, I think philosophy is worth paying attention to, and there's no agreement in it. So it must be that there are arguments that are really good arguments, but are just wrong.
Yeah. Have you spent a lot of time engaging in person with, I suppose, atheist philosophers over these issues?
No, not really. They bore me.
They bore you.
Yeah.
Interesting. I thought that would stimulate you a lot because if you were engaging with people from the other side that are very highly intellectual like yourself, I thought that would be a very
Yeah. Well, the thing is, they don't have any new arguments. I said there were some really good arguments, um, but there are no really new ones. there are perennial arguments that have been known for hundreds of years against, against theism and against Christianity in particular, that are really worth discussing. But um, there's nothing an atheist could say to me today that I didn't already know. That's why it would be boring. And it would also be boring because the atheist would be under the impression that I hadn't heard all this stuff before. That's what's really boring.
So you'd only it would take an interaction to have some kind of new argument for you to really be actually willing to engage.
Yeah, well, or at least someone who was willing to admit that he didn't have anything to say to me that I hadn't already heard. So then we could proceed to discuss these things. I mean, look, you can see occasional arguments I've had with atheists. For example, one of my best students, Louise Anthony, was a very aggressive atheist. I've had an exchange with her. There's do you know what a Festschrift is?
A Festschrift?
Yes.
I do not.
A Festschrift is a book which is put together uh, towards the end of a scholar's career to honor him or her, and it's usually got a lot of essays in honor of. So there's one for me, and the editors at the Oxford University Press that published it thought it would be interesting if I replied to some of these essays. So there are two essays in it, one by Louise Anthony, one by Alex Rosenberg, both very aggressive. You may have heard of Alex Rosenberg, one of the new atheists. He and I were the best men at each other's second weddings. And we're very good friends. But we don't usually talk about philosophy at all. We usually talk about politics and so on. But he did, he attacked some of my views on Darwinism in there, and she attacked what I had to say about the problem of evil, and I responded to them. So if you want to look at this book, what's it called? I forgot. Yeah. This is, I don't know, is this coming up backwards for you?
Now I can see it. Being Freedom and Method?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you look at there's essays in it by Louise Anthony and Alex Rosenberg, and you can see me arguing with atheists there. But that's quite rare.
Okay. And so you've said there's no new well, I guess do you think that that whole argument of is there a God or not has reached its limits with, I guess, arguments all like, do you think there ever can be a new argument for or against the existence of God that could be conducted now or in the future?
I suppose there can be new ones, yeah. I mean, um, it all depends. I mean, whether an argument is the same argument, whether an argument that you see here today is a new version of an old argument or a new argument, sometimes that's a matter of opinion or a matter of definition because there can be gray area as to a new argument. Um, and I expect so in the case of arguments for the um, existence of God, I don't know, are fine-tuning arguments from physics, are they new arguments for the existence of God? Or is that just an old argument, an old version of the design argument will apply to new data?
Yeah, I guess would that be like similar to the Kalam argument being just kind of a
Well, the Kalam argument is certainly not the fine-tuning argument.
Yeah, yeah, I was saying for would that be like the Kalam just being a reintroduced way of saying the cosmological argument?
Well, certainly the Kalam is be hard to say why that the the Kalam argument is the phrase, the Kalam argument is very refers to a very specific way of presenting the cosmological argument, right? A very precise order of introducing things. The phrase, the cosmological argument, is a vaguer phrase than the Kalam argument, but I guess any Kalam argument is a cosmological argument,
Yeah, I
and
guess
it's only
yeah, I guess my point was there you can't really introduce anything new with these arguments.
well, I mean, there there'd be stuff that's new. Yeah, because we didn't know about, um, the facts that are alluded to in the fine-tuning argument until fairly recently in the history of physics. Um, but, um, this is just people keep pointing to things in nature and saying, "Look, here's design," and or, "Here's the evidence of intelligent design," or something like that, and they keep pointing to new things, but is it the same old argument with new
Oh, I see, yeah.
applied to new things, or is it I mean, that's just a matter of definition, I suppose.
Yeah, because I imagine there must be things in philosophy that we just can't know,
Yeah, well,
or is it
expect obviously, there are things everywhere we can't know.
yeah, but even can't know from a perspective of even time can't solve them. Like, these are situations where it wouldn't just we're not just waiting on discoveries, these are just the can't
Well, I
knows to
mean,
us.
yeah, I think that's wow. I'm in the theory of free will. I'm what my people who don't like my certain aspects of my views call a Mysterian. That is, but because I say it's just a mystery. Um, we don't understand how you can have free will if indeterminism is true. So they say, all right, Van Inwagen, you say free will is incompatible with determinism, but look, here's all these great arguments to show that free will is incompatible with indeterminism. You must believe, since you believe that free will is incompatible with determinism, and since you believe that free will exists, you must think it's compatible with indeterminism. So what's wrong with all these arguments to show that it's incompatible with indeterminism? I say, I don't know. There's something wrong with them. I just don't know what it is. And I compare it with, um, so do you know who Zeno of Elea was? He was a philosopher. Elea is one of the Greek islands. He was a philosopher, uh, pre pre-Socratic philosopher, and he said there was no such thing as change or motion in the world. And one of his arguments is called the arrow argument, and it's not quite clear how it goes because we have it only from a description of it in Aristotle, and Aristotle's description of it isn't very clear. But I like to think it's like this. You look at a photograph, or rather, since we're talking about somebody who lived between 4 and 500 BC, let's say a painting. So you got a painting of an arrow in the air, right? It's not moving, right? But so it shows the arrow as it was at one instant, right?
Yeah.
And it wasn't moving at that instant, but it was the same at any instant. So it never moved. So, but if anything ever moves, it's an arrow flying through the air. So nothing ever moves. If there's any change, it's change of position. So if there's no movement, is change of position. If there's no movement, there's no change of position, and there's no change at all. So change is unreal. Call that the arrow argument. Um, so if you told the arrow argument to an ancient Greek, I think the ancient Greek wouldn't have known what was wrong with it. Today, I think you know what's wrong with it if you've taken Calculus 1. When as soon as you study differential calculus, you know what's wrong with that argument. Or at least you have the materials for saying what's wrong with that argument. But your ancient Greek who hears the argument, he didn't have the opportunity to take a course in differential calculus because it hadn't been invented yet. Um, so I think he was perfectly entitled to say, well, yeah, I don't know. I can't see what's wrong with that argument. It looks watertight to me, except for the fact that its conclusion is obviously false because things do move. So um, I'm just gonna say it's good argument, but it's wrong. Well, that's what I say about a lot of arguments in free about what I say for the arguments for the incompatibility of free will and indeterminism. They're good arguments. They must be wrong because the conclusion is wrong. Because we do have free will.
Yeah, and you said, I mean, obviously you said the same thing about atheism itself. So given that, do you ever have doubts in the existence of God even to this day since your conversion?
I think I have doubts about most things. Do you must be like having doubts about the existence of free will or an objective morality or something, but um and of course, you know, as a Christian, I believe that these doubts aren't free floating. I believe that, well, as St. Paul says, do you not know that we war against principalities and powers? You know, I do think there are actual entities who um, want to encourage me to have these doubts. Not that I wouldn't have them anyway, but I mean, I think they whisper in my ear as well. So um, yeah, I have doubts. That's what faith is, in fact. Um, so one talks about when after death, when faith is swallowed up in vision, when you just say, well, then there's no more doubt. But I mean, I think when you talk about faith, you imply the existence of doubt. That is, when I say doubt, I mean episodes of doubt. Um, Even C.S. Lewis, who's supposed to be such a paragon of the faith, said occasionally he has episodes where he says to himself, "How did you of all people, come to believe this cock and bull story?" Um, so yeah,
Yeah, and
sure.
speaking of those entities, do you think you've ever had any type of supernatural or paranormal encounter?
Sorry, I missed something there. Ask the question again.
Sure. Do you think you've ever had any type of
Oh,
supernatural?
no, no, never.
No, never.
No.
Okay. I thought
And
I'd ask.
I know people who think they have, and people I respect, and I don't doubt their stories. I mean, I don't say I believe them either. I neither doubt nor believe them because I certainly think they're possible. Um, and it's not up to me really to. I don't have to make a decision about whether they're right or wrong because nothing in my life depends on whether those experiences of theirs are accurately reported or not. But I certainly do not. I have never had the least tincture of either that or any kind of religious experience, unless you just mean religious emotion.
Yeah, I was just yeah, no, I was literally I meant, uh, something outside the natural realm, such as some kind of demonic or angelic
Well, I
entity.
mean, St. Paul says he was caught up into the third heaven. No, I suppose well, I have to believe he was because it's in Holy Scripture, but um, well, I guess actually all that's in Holy Scripture is that St. Paul said he was caught up into the um, third heaven. At least, at any rate, he sincerely believed that he was, but no, I've never had an experience like that.
Do you think the future of philosophy will become more secular or religious? I guess the philosophers themselves.
About as secular as they could get right now, right? Well, I mean, so there's supposed to be um, analytical philosophers and Anglophone analytical philosophers have answered questionnaires on what they believe. About 15% of us believe in God.
15.
Mm. So that's pretty secular, I guess. Yeah.
Yes.
So will it get more secular? Actually, you might say that it's not as secular as people thought. In the up until this is founding of the Society of Christian Philosophers around 1980, I think it was. Um, it was thought that there were practically no Christian philosophers. Then a lot of them, when the society was founded, then a lot of them came out of the woodwork as it was, as it were. When they found out that there was actually a society they could join.
Wow. Does that number surprise you though? 15%? I feel like if I was in that field as a Christian, I'd be like, "Really?" I just feel like that seems low.
Um, no, well, that's um, now I'm not sure what the percentage of atheists is. That is, that's the percentage of philosophers who do believe in God, as
Right.
opposed to
Oh, I see.
believe that there's no God. But now that's of course connected um, with some. Well, no, I won't get into that question. That's just sociology anyway. But it's probably pretty much the same as in any other academic field.
Hmm.
Probably the same with historians or economists or English literature or what.
I'd have to see the numbers on that, but this one's kind of more of a broader question. This is pretty broad. I don't know if this is a good or the right question to ask, but how has being a philosopher kinda shaped how you perceive things such as your everyday life experience, really, suffering, joy, death, all these things?
Now, suffering, you mean my suffering or the general existence of suffering?
Let's do both. Let's do both.
I haven't done any suffering, so I can't, except for when my first wife kicked me out. That's about the only bad thing that's ever happened to me in my life. I just managed to get through almost 83 years in this world without uh, anything very bad happening to me.
Well, I guess it's also a question of how you would measure suffering too.
Well, how would you I mean, by any measure,
Yeah.
nothing very bad has ever happened to me, except that one thing.
Okay, then I guess we can do suffering from a everyone in history standpoint collectively.
Well, it comes into my story of the world then, which is the Christian story. Then as I have to think about, suffering, um, as the role that it plays in, salvation history. So, and yeah, naturally, I suppose the way I think about, say, the problem of evil as a philosopher, those certainly deeply influence the way I think about suffering.
Yeah, how do you, I guess,
And I'm
reconcile?
not very look, so suppose I met a woman, say, whose daughter had just died of some terrible, painful disease, and she was, she was cursing God for this. And you know what it would occur to me to say to her? Hey, you already knew that there were hundreds of thousands of other mothers whose children died that way, and that didn't bother you. Why does this bother you? Even I wouldn't say that, right? But I have to bite back saying that. That's why I could never be a member of the clergy. Um, and other philosophers have reported that same feeling to me. Um, so that's one way in which philosophy influences the way I think about suffering. This overly rationalistic way, which I can recognize it as overly realistic, but um, I can't do anything about its being overly realistic.
Has has it helped you being a philosopher have a better perspective on experiencing life's positive moments such as joy, love, peace, stuff like that?
No, those are things I just experience. I mean, look, um, so a couple of years ago, those things were taken away from me for a while. I suffer from restless leg syndrome. I don't know if it doesn't make much difference what that is, just something that interferes with your sleep. So my neurologist prescribed um, an opioid called Suboxone for this, and it tipped me off. It just destroyed my life to me for a few minutes. That is, I was just in despair about everything. There was anhedonia, where there's no pleasure you take in anything. There was this kind of existential despair, whereas Pascal said, "The eternal silences of the infinite spaces terrifies me." Yeah, I could experience that. Um, it was the most awful thing that had ever happened to me. It lasted 3 or 4 months, actually. I still get twinges of it, every now and then. But what I could do is, um, as a philosopher well, look, so there's this, cognitive behavioral therapy, right? Some that's very helpful to a lot of people in this situation. So I went to somebody who practices that, and it turns out everything they could tell me to do, I'd already invented for myself, by thinking about it philosophically. So, for example, this is not thinking to myself, this is not news. This is a feeling. A feeling does not reveal to you the way reality is. A feeling is just a feeling. Furthermore, feelings don't last forever. They come and they go. This terrible feeling that you're having right now, it will be gone one day. And you don't really believe these things either. You're just having the feeling that you would have, that somebody who did believe these things would have. Um, the feeling of despair is not the same thing as the belief that despair is based on. Um, uh, so almost those when I told the behavioral therapist the techniques I was using for trying to deal with this myself, he would have said, "But that's just what I would have told you to do." Uh, so in that sense, um, when I had lost these things like peace and joy and so on, philosophy did help me to cope with the loss of them.
I'm surprised you didn't count that as in the suffering chart for the restless what's it called? Restless leg syndrome?
Well, that's yeah, it's suffering if you like, but restless leg syndrome is just this feeling in the back of your knees that keeps you awake at night. It's not even pain. Um, but yeah, I guess maybe I could, in addition to maybe I should have added that to the divorce thing as the one time I had suffering. But um, I recall one of my Zoom friends said to me, "Well, I think psychological suffering is so much worse than physical suffering." And I said, "Oh no, it isn't. Would- If I have to, if I have to have this existential despair, uh, I would rather have that than, um, uh, the pain that a lot of um, terminal cancer sufferers go through." Um,
Yeah, wow. Wait, so I mean, do philosophers like yourself retire? Do you plan on doing that? Do you wanna do this until
well, I'm emeritus. I'm retired in that sense, but I don't have to stop working.
Yeah.
And I did until until just this last spring, I did teach one course a year at Duke University. Well, I would teach a graduate seminar every spring at Duke for the past since I retired from Notre Dame.
What class was that?
Well, it would be a graduate seminar, not always the same subject.
So then you don't ever plan on not teaching?
I think I'm done teaching.
You're done.
Yeah. Hey, I'll be 83 next month. You gotta stop sometime.
How do you often reflect, I guess, on your full? Because how long you been teaching total now? How many years?
Well, let's see. I think that probably from if I'm allowed to teach, if I'm allowed to count being a graduate assistant, um, then ever since 65, that makes it a nice, um, even what, 60 years, right?
60 years in the education field, okay. What would you say are your proudest moments?
Applause at the end of the last class, maybe. Proudest teaching moments. I mean, as opposed to proudest moments in the profession.
Do those stack up well in terms of your proudness level for writing the books too?
I don't know if my proudest. I mean, I would think that my proudest moments, would be the things that people have said about the books rather than, uh, but, or the papers or, uh, so on, but, uh,
Are you familiar with a gentleman named Graham Appy?
yeah, yeah,
Okay, so I asked Graham Appy who he thought were the most impressive, theist philosophers, or maybe I said atheist and theist, maybe it was both, but he mentioned your name.
mhm. Well,
So
that's yeah, well, we know. You get to be our age, you know everybody, right?
yeah, because I wanted to ask you, who do you think are the most impressive philosophers today?
They have to be alive?
I prefer it you can say a group you can say 3 to 5 alive and 3 to 5 that are dead if that many come to your mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm thinking some of the most impressive ones are very recently done. Now, Alvin Plantinga is very far gone in Alzheimer's, and he's in any case 92. Um, and Saul Kripke just died, and he was certainly very impressive philosopher. David Lewis died young, early 60s, um, many years ago. He was an incredibly impressive philosopher. Um, but I mean, and of the best philosophers that are really working now, that are not only alive but working. I would say you asked for 3, right? I can I'm not sure who 3 would I'll tell you 1 and 2. Anyway, I think the best philosopher working now is John Hawthorne,
Okay.
and the second best is Lara Buchek.
Haven't heard of her.
She's at, Princeton. Young.
Is John's Christian, is Laura Christian too?
Yeah, oh, yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I don't that does is not really what impresses me about them, though.
Sure, I was curious.
Mm.
And, obviously, I think you're a big fiction guy, aren't you? You're in the scientific fiction?
I like science fiction, yeah.
Is that your go-to genre outside of philosophy books?
Sorry, what was the
Is that your go-to genre of book? Like, is that your favorite genre of book?
I mean, it's not the only genre book I would read, but, um, yeah, that's probably my but, you know, science fiction is like rock music. You very rarely find somebody who likes all of rock music, right?
Yeah.
Gene Zimmerman does, but, mostly there are kinds that somebody will really like and kinds they can't stand. Uh, right, so, I mean, I really like British folk rock, but I'm not very fond of heavy metal. Uh, but in science fiction, I'm like that. They're almost most science fiction, don't interest me, very much. The kind I like is what I call, uh, British space opera.
British space opera.
Mhm. You know what space opera is?
No.
Space opera is, well, first of all, somebody in the 1930s decided to call, um, certain programs on the radio soap operas, right? Because, they were usually sponsored by some kind of dish detergent, um, and that's where the term soap opera, came from. Then that term, some westerns, then somebody inspired by that term started calling them haute operas, and then the term got taken over into science fiction, and the term space opera was invented. But what a space opera is science fiction stories that involve vast expanses of space and time. So unlike, say, science fiction stories that would be set in the very near future, or time travel stories about about ancient Rome or Greece, no, you gotta go thousands, millions of years into the future, vast interstellar expanses. That is um, pretty much the kind I like.
Okay, I'm trying to think an example of that, because
Alistair Reynolds, Charles Stross.
okay. Did they have you heard of a book called Hyperion?
Yeah, I
Is
haven't
that
read I
is that
haven't
Phila
read it. That's probably a space opera.
okay.
Um,
Or C.S. Lewis has his own trilogy series
well, no,
about
yeah, I mean, that's mere interplanetary. Uh,
Mir
but um, it has its. I don't like it. Um, it's on a different literary level from those other things, and it's. Um, I would call them theological fantasies rather than science fiction at all. It's called this. It is called the space trilogy. That's true, but it's really more of a theological fantasy.
Okay. How many books do you think you've read in your whole life? Like,
I
estimate.
have no idea.
If you could estimate, would you say it's more than
No, I
would you
couldn't estimate. I mean,
really?
how many Douglas firs are there in Canada? Estimate. You wouldn't know where to begin, right?
Yeah. Okay. I got I got one more question for you.
Mhm.
Okay. So, if you had the opportunity to ask God one question, knowing He'd give you the answer right away, what would you ask Him?
Hmm. Yeah, I remember thinking about that question, and I would think if I was in a position to ask God a question, there wouldn't be any more questions I would wanna know the answers to. I would be in a situation where everything was settled.
Really? Even if it happened, like, right now, if you heard His voice and said, "I'll answer one question."
Well, it wouldn't be, "Is there a God?" Would it be? No. Now, there's a ghost story by Kingsley Amis called The Green Man, and, there's a character that's sort of like God in it, and, he does give the narrator, the opportunity to ask him any one question, uh and he said, "Yeah, is there life after death?" And, he said, "Well, yes, I suppose. I don't see what else you could call it." Um, but if I were talking to God, I would assume I guess you wanna say that this I just know that this being is God, but without knowing anything else, about him.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's hard for me to think of, God existing without that settling the question of whether there's life after death. So, that question would pretty much be off the boards too. I just think that would just the let's it might be better Might be better if you could just answer the question. If you could somehow get the answer to any question you like, you don't know how, but you're convinced that the answer would be reliable.
Wait, is that it?
Well, I mean, that is, if in that case, I guess would um, ask it: is naturalism right? Is the physical universe everything, or is there a surround that's responsible for the physical universe?
That'd be your question.
Yeah, I guess it would depend too how much I could build into the question. Could I ask, if there is a surround, what's it like?
This is like I'll give you God's
It's
God's
hard to
right there.
it's hard to, you know, w sometimes say whether you've asked 1 question or 2 or 3 or 4, how many, questions you can build into the structure of 1 question. It's like how many wishes, um, the devil will give you. Well, can you say, "My first wish is for 10 wishes?" Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tough one for a slew of reasons, as you have the Almighty in front of you, and you get 1 question, now you're thinking hard about the question because you don't wanna waste the question, but you also want it to be extremely purposeful.
Yeah, I would actually doubt that, um, anybody who was offering to answer 1 question for me would be God anyway, in a real situation. I don't take this I wouldn't be that, picky about if it's just a hypothetical question like you're asking us, but I have to say that if somebody really did say, "Here's God on the line who'll answer any question for you," I would certainly doubt whether it really was God on the other end of the line.
Fair. Cool. Well, Peter, I appreciate the time. Do you have any other tips, pieces of advice, any wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
I don't think there's been any wisdom so far. Well, there can't be any more, wisdom, but if I have any wisdom, I think I've already, produced that wisdom.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate your time. Thanks for coming on Worldviews.
You're very welcome. That
Free audio post-production by alphonic.com.